All right, so where we left off, couple of important plot points. I broke Cengage, we fixed Cengage, but we're going to use a couple of different texts and some other things out of Cengage. So the advantage to the Cengage Unlimited is I can do that. I can change things around as we go. And so we've kind of done a little backup. So we're going to go a little slower at the beginning and then try to ramp up as we get a little further in to kind of help everybody's anxiety and their ability to function in here. So a couple of things I want to talk about before we get into actually the programming today. So I want to talk about where we kind of left off. This idea that virtual reality is a new thing that we've got going on. So all of these things are captivated and run by programs. We've got the World Wide Web. We've got hypertext. And some of you have taken our web design course, so some of this you already know. So the web consists of servers and browsers, or clients if you want to call them that. They're kind of synonymous. In other words, they reach out and they get all the information from somewhere, and then they display it. And that's really changed our world significantly. So some of you don't remember the time when we had to store everything on our own computer. Now, most of us store everything in some form of cloud storage. We store it on Google Docs. We store it in our Apple accounts. We store it on whatever system we're using. If we're using Microsoft Office 365, we have a terabyte of storage available that you can just store data on. So those web applications are really taking off. Most companies now don't build their own servers. They contract that services out. And so all you really need for your employees in a lot of cases is a web browser. If they can get on the web, they can see all their documents, they can work from anywhere. And especially now that we've got this COVID thing happening, that actually is kind of nice. I don't have to be locked in my office. I can do my work from home in a lot of cases. Or at some point, you'll be able to go to things like these coffee shops. People used to work in coffee shops, and they used to be able to go visit things. So you'll see that that's changing our world around us. Even our own things like Blackboard, and we're going to show you how Cengage works with that. We're doing these things, a lot of them online. So other things that have really changed, this idea of big data. So now we have information from all over. How do we deal with it? And we want to focus in this class, and there's a discussion board from last week that most people participated in. If you haven't, I haven't pulled grades on them yet. Please quickly go do that. I'll give you that first week extension just to make sure everybody's kind of on the same board. But we look at what is an ideal language to start this idea of programming with. And I can easily find over 600 different programming languages. Which one do we pick? Looked around and we chose Python. Is it the right decision? It's a language that gets used a lot, but is it possibly the best one? I think it's got some advantages, but there's also advantages for some of the other languages. So make sure you go out, you look at that discussion board, you've commented, you've examined those. I think it doesn't matter in some ways as long as you start with one language. You start getting some of these ideas about how you problem solve, break things into algorithms, and then you're able to translate it into there. But what is interesting to me about Python is a great language for problem solving. So in other words, if I want to be a data scientist, I may end up using Python. If I want to be a hacker, Python makes a great script for me to go out and attack other systems with. Not that I'm advocating that. I just saw the look on your face like, oh, yeah. If I am going to be involved in mathematics, so there's another language that works very similar to Python called R, and you may have seen that already. And so if I'm going to analyze large amounts of data, and I need to do it cheaply because we can't afford SPSS or some of the bigger $10,000, $12,000, $20,000 a year tools, there's stuff out there, and Python is closely related to a lot of those. It's easy to use, it's friendly, and it also gives us the opportunity to talk about Monty Python and some of the jokes that will exist out of here. So always be prepared for Monty Python jokes. So Python typically is what we call an interpreted language. In other words, what you type gets changed into machine code on the fly. So the difference with that, there are also languages called compiled languages, and a compiled language takes the commands you create in a batch file and turns them directly into machine language code. And there are advantages to both. So Python is really great at small things if I have a lot of system memory and a lot of resources. And luckily, over the last 10 years, computers have gotten so fast that it's not as big of an issue. 10 years ago, I would have said, man, we really need a compiled language. And that compiled language takes what we type and brings it down to as near to that zeros and ones as the computer will interpret. It makes it as small as possible, and it can run quicker. But now our computers are so powerful, the stuff, at least at the level we're going to do, is going to move pretty quickly, and we don't need to necessarily worry about it. All right, so we're going to talk about this Python shell. And so the book talks about a Python shell. We are not yet going to install Python on your native computer. I want to get us used to working on it inside of Cengage first. And yes, Cengage sometimes has some hiccups, so I'm going to launch this and show you how it should look. And with Murphy's Law in place, let's see how this works. So programming exercise 1-1, while it's in here, I actually set it up only as a practice. So we can use this shell and we can see what it would look like and what things are going to work like. So we're going to start assignment now. And it does take a little bit to load depending on your speed of the computer. And I have had a couple of instances where this decided it didn't like life. So if it doesn't let you log in, it's another benefit to starting early. Okay, so have you, okay, so exercise 1-1, there you go. But have you, yeah, all right, should be good. All right. So it will take a little bit to run. This is the Cengage. So this is the same as when we say the idle shell. This is the idle shell, but through Cengage MindTap. So it looks a little different than the pictures in the book, but it's the same construct. If I were running Linux and I were at a command line, yeah, you need to buy it first. All right, so hang with me. All right, so this is the same shell as what you would see if we had loaded this on our computer. And we're going to do that, but we're going to save one step at a time. And in this particular case, I can tell that in the background, Cengage servers that we're running on are actually running on Linux. And just because it says so. It tells us what version, 3.7.4, gives us our date and everything, and that's our shell. And so our shell, the other way I know that I'm at the shell is it actually says, it's got those three little arrows. And those three little arrows tell us that we're at that shell. And so we can do some things at the shell. Our computer is pretty smart. It will do some things. And so if we do something like these math operations that we're seeing here, so if I just type 8, oops, get in the right box here, it echoes that out. It mirrors it out. Oh, well, that's interesting. Doesn't do a lot for me yet. But maybe I want to do a math operation. 452 times 37, and it's going to give me a result. Well, maybe I want to do divided by 25. So it's kind of like a scratch pad. We can do some things this way to start with. So a couple of quick notes about Python. So the asterisk is our time symbol. I have had people try to do this in the past, and they put an X down there. And it goes, what are you talking about? Most of us are used to it, but it does, some people do get panicked and go, oh, where's the... The other thing then is if I do 2 of them. So if I do 2 and I do it to 10, well, it's not 2 to the 10th, it's not 2 times 10, it's 2 to the 10th power. So it's a really quick way. I can do exponents in there. I can divide. An interesting one I can do, if I hit the divide key twice, it looks the same. But now let's see what happens if I do 101 divided by 10. That gives us a whole number result. It just chops off. So it's like dropping the remainder. That's kind of weird. But we use it sometimes internally. There are also times we also use another operator called the modulus, and we actually get the remainder piece because that's what we care about. But for now, I encourage you to just come in here, play with some of the math functions, see if you can get it to work. 144, that one's pretty self-evident. So we're not making you do anything too horrible yet. You can even, so the other thing we can start with is you can look at some print operations in here. So this one's purely open as a kind of a scratch pad for you. So if I want to print something, so I'm going to print I don't know why, but I feel like being Mark today. So a couple of elements we need in when we do a print function. So if I do these, I call these functions. And functions we always pass in parentheses. And you'll see sometimes in our editors later on that the editor will actually put some of those things in us for us, trying to get us to not make as big a mistake as what we possibly could. And if I have text, I need to enclose it in quotation marks. So, hi, my name is Mark. Well, that's not very exciting, but I'm going to give you a shortcut that is very handy. If I hit the up arrow key, the very same thing I typed before, and notice I can actually scroll through my last statements. So if I want to come back and revise that, I can hit the up arrow key when I'm testing something like this. I don't have to retype the whole thing. And so I go, oh yeah, see, I didn't want to capitalize A. So now I can once again run that. Now I can revise it again. I can change this in any way. So I can go back to my original. I can where I fixed it, so I can scroll back and forth on those. And that's something I don't think the book, if I remember correctly, does not show you how to do. And this actually makes life a lot easier when you do that. So we can also manipulate some things in here. So we know we could add pluses, and we could do that with numbers. Well, let's see what happens if I do that with text. Just because, A, my name's not Mark and nobody has ever called me tall, I want to see what happens when I hit this. So it actually allows us to add text together. But notice what it did. It doesn't add a space in automatically for us. So I'm going to need to come back in. Go scroll back over here. Add a space. And now it actually looks correct. So I've left this one open as just a sandbox. And so any of those that say they will not be graded, that's what I've kind of put them in just for you to practice on and see if we can figure out how to get through some of this. So the very same thing in the next couple of weeks when we install Python. So on this computer, I thought I started, there we go. Here is a version of Python that I installed. It looks very similar, and the same things would work. If I wanted to type in print hi, I'm Joe, I get the same thing, and I can scroll back. So a couple of little pieces that make life easy here. Now, we're going to look at this here in a little bit. Notice this one, I can tell that you were on Windows. Here we're on Linux. In some versions in here, the examples, so if I go to the PowerPoint, which I have somewhere down here, if I go to PowerPoint and I look at their expressions, in this case, this is on a Mac. Notice here we say we're on some kind of a Mac build. It all looks the same. So that's the other reason that I really liked Python is I can literally run it on almost anything. So it makes life very, very easy that way. All right, so I want to get out of that. I want to close it. I can close that assignment, and notice it left all of these things open. So I have some things in here, and I will post a link to make it easier. But when you're starting to do some work, there is a section here called Code Snippets. Code snippets might be very helpful to you as we go through some of these. So I'm going to pull up one a little further up from where we're at. And there are all these practices with different types of functions. So these are not graded. These are just available as a assistance for you. So code snippets, and I will put a link in a little clicker to it for you. Come on. This looks a little different, and hopefully it will load. And I don't have to yell at Cengage and get put on hold for hours and hours. Okay, so this looks similar, but we don't have any of the headings. We don't know anything about it. And it just has a simple run command. So it can give us some examples of what's going to happen. So here we have different variables and different pieces. So these might be useful. You can also edit them. So if I wanted to edit Mary Poppins to and I run this, it actually executes that code against what I have here. So these are very useful, and I can make a direct link at some place in there to make it a little easier for you. These are all these, they're called code snippets. So part one, when we start looking at assignments and variables and things, so there is a how to name things. So another good assistance point in there. I wish they would open quicker, but so naming rules. Names may not contain spaces, and you'll hear me say that over and over and over again. Spaces are bad. The computer hits you in that space and says, I'm done. Names must start with either an alphabetic character or the underscore character. Contains only alphabetic characters. So there are lots of those in there for you to experiment with and to try. So when I'm at this stage in here, I can also get to the entire book for this course. So notice we switched it up, and I'm showing you the first programs one. Same author, it just starts a little slower for us, and we can go through and grab some of the content this way. So you can also go to the table of contents, and all of these are in here. So some of you have mentioned Java and or C++ when I look in the discussion board, and so here actually is some information about how to transition from different languages. So different companies use different languages, different purposes. So the book is very handy. The other thing I have noticed, so if I tell you that at the, let's say, chapter 2, and we're looking at a project, and I say, hey, let's go look at this at the back of the book. What I have discovered is, and this is an odd quirk in Cengage, these at the end of chapter activities don't appear if I go directly from the link. So here I have where I've launched the textbook alone. And you would think they would be identical. But for whatever weird reason, they don't link to the end of the chapter activities. And I haven't figured out, nobody can tell me why. It's one of those oddities we have discovered in Cengage. So program assignment 1-1, that's a simple, you get credit for looking at it. It's a sandbox for you. we'll launch number 2. So 1-2. So in this case, so 1-2 does something a little different. So 1-2, you notice, now has a third module in here. So instructions, and then we have this one called myinfo.py. And then we have our terminal over here. All right, so we need to talk a little bit about what's going on in the world around us. So when I actually write a program, so it may be easier to show you on this. So here's my shell. The other part of this shell that I can run, if I do File, New, I switch from batch mode here and interactive mode. So this is interactive, this is batch. This allows me to create a program that I can store and save. I can't do that from just the shell directly. Everything that's Python that is a file, at least where we're at now, is going to end with .py. So if I do File, New, and I interact here in my shell and I say print, this is a file, and I want to save that, so File, Save. It's going to save it as a .py file. And I'm going to save that somewhere I can see it really easily. Let's go to Downloads. And I'm going to save this as first. So when I save that, and I go to look for it, let me find Downloads. So this is going to say first.py. It automatically puts that on. It's recognized as a Python file. It is that native format. So that's what we're actually doing inside of here. So let me get this out of the way. So this says put your code here. Okay. And we're going to put our code there. So we're going to do a print statement for print. And it does something really handy. So anytime I hit a quote mark, it actually puts 2 of them in. So it tells me, hey, you have to close that. So then I'm going to do another print statement. My address. And then I can go down to the next line. Make sure I space out. All right, so now there's something weird happened here. So I need to go back. And right now it's saying, oh, that must be some kind of actual number. It's trying to do mathematical operations. So it's trying to subtract 416 from 402. And so if I actually just hit enter now, and I run this, so down here at the very bottom, down in the right-hand corner, is a run module. It's going to go, I don't know what you got going on there. And notice it calls it on this line, but I'm going to guess it's really this line that's got an error. So if I remove this, or the other thing I can do, I don't know if it'll work inside of Cengage here. Well, let's just remove it, easiest way. I was going to show you how to do a remove line here. So now if I go to run that, oh, maybe I do have something weird. Line 3, what have I done? Print. There we go. Notice up here what I did not do is put an ending parenthesis in. So when you're typing, you know what you want to type. And sometimes that doesn't work. So now I'm going to run it. And notice over here, it says, all right. we've managed to run your program. So down here at the bottom are a couple of other options you have. So I can actually download this file. I can actually delete it. I can rename it. So if I wanted to change this and call it my first program, now I've changed the name of that to my first program. So the other piece is we need to actually submit it. So over here on the left-hand side, there's a couple of different things over here. So here's my instructions, the tasks. So here I can say, all right, I want to run checks. It says some kind of error. 0 out of 1 checks. Program displays information in the console. You have to do what? Oh, use exactly what they said? Ah. I assume this one just looked for. All right, so let's go back. And I may have also made it angry doing the. Let's see if we change that to this exactly. Sure it's run, so it shows it in there. Interesting. All right, if you expected output, red keywords were missing or out of order. Interesting. All right, I'll have to see what. Did you get yours, Quade, to pass? I was just curious what you did differently there. Because it looks like, because it shows you exactly what it's supposed to. It's got a piece of coding in there. It's earlier, and it may be on my side that I have something weird set up here. And it may also be that because I'm in the instructor mode instead of the student mode. If you run into something and it looks correct, let me know and I will go in and look at what you have. Because it actually will tell me all kinds of things here. So one of them it will tell me is if you cut and paste into there, which is interesting. And then I can actually make it bigger. If I can click on the bottom one, I can get to just the code area. So I can have all the instructions showing, and for the shorter ones, it should work fine. And it may not let me. So in this case, if I click submit, it will tell me that I have submitted it and I got a really bad grade. The other way, or the other thing I have set these up for, though, which is good, is you have, I believe it's 10, but so it should be nearly unlimited. You could submit those multiple times. So I figure out what it's asking for that we've missed. Certainly that looks like the output it's looking at. And again, I'm not sure because I'm in here as the instructor, it may be the grading issue is within there. When we do that, if you go, oh, I really need to change something on a program later on, you can actually do that and resubmit it, and it will push out the newest grade to Blackboard. So let's look at number 3 really quickly. See if I can get it to load slowly, ever so slowly. I wonder if I All right, so this one is also one that we said, all right, I want you to practice it and try it, but I don't have it set up to grade, so we can actually try that. So evaluate the output and error message of the following code at a shell prompt. So if I just type this in, so my name is name, it's going to give me an error because it's considering, it says it's going to print this, my name is, but we don't have a value in name yet. So we've got a variable. So in this case, that variable is holding, we want it to hold a value for name. So we have to actually assign that first. So if I said name, back in there, so name equals it, let's see if it actually stored it. And here's where that up arrow key is very handy in here, because I can now go back to my original and it's going to say, hey, my name is Brad. We've stored an idea or a piece of text in there. So I could change that. I could say name equals, let's go back to my Joe. And now if I go back up, it's going to print my name is Joe. That's that idea that we're storing names or some value in there. So let's take a look at this statement. So here is one weird thing about Python. So the equals sign here is not really an equal sign. We call it an assignment operator, and it says whatever is to the right gets shoved into the left. So if I say my name is Mary, it takes the value of Mary and shoves it into name. But it's got to be from the right-hand side to the left-hand side. So that works. If I did it this way, it's going to say, I don't understand that. That doesn't make any sense to me. It's got an error. So it's always assigning from the right to the left. Well, where this comes in a little later when we start doing evaluations of expressions, so we say we want to see if something is equal, we actually use a different operator. So when we actually want to see if something is equal to another, we actually use this. We use two equal signs together. So a single equals is what we call an assignment operator, and it shoves stuff to the left. So we could even do this. So right now, if I printed that out and I said, my name is Mary. Great. I could actually say name 2 is equal to Barbara. And the advantage to these is kind of being a free float is you can do whatever you would like to do on those. So now we actually have two variables in there. So we could create a statement to print out both of those. Comma, and we want and in quotes because we want to print that. We separate them with commas, name 2, and now it's going to say my name is Mary and Barbara. So we can do that. We can actually assign values this way. So we could say equals name. So now what it's going to do is shove whatever value we had in name into this name2 variable. So now if I go back, it's going to say my name is Mary and Mary because we moved it around. So that's what I have this one set up for, is just some practice on output. All right. So this is one of the first ones where you're going to have to do something a little tougher because we're going to edit some code. And I will say, if you're on a smaller monitor, this gets kind of interesting because you have a lot of stuff to put in there. So in this case, we're going to ask for a couple of different things. So I want to look at them very quickly. So we all know that to get area is width times height, or width times length, whatever you want to look at it that way. In this case, we're using a couple of things in Python. So we can assign a variable. So width equals. Now we're going to do a couple of things that are really interesting. We can actually take an input in there. So input. And on the input, it lets us put some text in there that says, please enter a width. Now, if I just stop here, I have a problem with the data that we're going to get in. And the problem is, everything we take in as an input is always a string value. We want to change it to some form of numeric value. Well, the way we can do that, and in this case we're converting it to an integer, is we need to take it and pass it into the integer function. So one way we could do that is we could say width equals, and pass it this way. So now we have a set of functions, and we say here we get an input, and here we change it into an integer. But Python lets us do a shortcut. And Python, if you notice over here, lets us actually just do the entire thing, int, and then we need a second parenthesis. So we can do this all in one line. And that's one of the advantages to Python. In a lot of programming languages, I would have to do a couple of things. So I would have to declare, so this will not work, so just let me show you what it would look like. I would have to declare my variable width, and I would have to tell you that it's going to be an whatever value. So I'm going to say it's going to be a string because we know that that's going to happen first. So I declare width a string. I then would have to get an input. I would then have to try to assign it to another variable because most programming languages I can't convert from one type of variable to another on the fly. Python lets us do that. So in a lot of languages, this line is really about 5 to 6 lines of code. So it's kind of a nice touch. We get to do all these things. So I always like to run them and try them and see what happens. So I'm going to hit run. Please enter a width. Well, first off, I notice I need to change this right here. So I want to put a colon and a space. So it doesn't look like my input area here is right away. So I'm going to rerun it. Please enter a width, and I'm going to see if it takes a number. Great, it did. That's what the intent of the program was. Well, now I need to write one that's also going to get the height or the length, whichever way. I'm going to call it length, and we'll see if we can make this angry at me again. So, and I'm going to do the same thing. And in fact, it's so close to the same thing, I'm going to use my copy and paste. Oops. See if it'll let me from here. Sometimes the copying in here is a little odd, so copy. Maybe it won't let me paste in there. There it was. All right, I had to use a Control V to paste. So I have input, please enter a length. So now we have two numbers, and a lot of times I'll put in a test statement. So I will print. So now I can print both of those if I go down here and run it, just to make sure they're getting assigned in the right spots. And so now I go, oh, yep, in my test here, those both came out. So then I need a new value called area. And I don't have to pre-assign it. I'm just doing this on the fly. Equals width times length. And then I can put a print statement in. Something like your area is and I separate them with commas. Square units. So now I've got a working program. I need to take out one line here. So we don't need this line anymore. So just for housekeeping, I'm going to take it out. And now I have this program that says I'm going to take a length, hopefully I'll multiply it and give me an area. So I'm going to try it. Oh, unexpected end of file while parsing. So when I look through here, I go, well, what have I done? Nope, those are fine, those are fine. But look what I forgot to do. I forgot to put an ending parenthesis in there. So these messages will help you. So it says line 6. So when I got down to here, it goes, am I still continuing? What am I doing? So now we'll run it. Enter a width, 10, 20. Your area is 200 square units. Well, let's play I want to see if I can break it. And right now we don't have any error checking. So let's see what happens if I put in a value of ABC. So our program isn't yet robust because it said I took in ABC as a string. I don't know how to convert that to base 10, and which is what it was trying to do here. So do have to be cautious in these. So sometimes the best way to do it is tell your people at this point, you'd put in instructions and say, make sure you only use a number. So let's see if that one will pass my check. 0 of 3. So I'm assuming that is because I'm in here as the instructor is why it's not wanting to do that. So I'll have to log back in as a student at some point to make sure that works. Because clearly we know this works. I can also, from my side, I can see your programs if I need to, and I can look at them and give you some hints and help. And again, we can actually submit that multiple times. All right, so finishing up this week. Go back. There's my discussion board. So everybody, I think, has pretty much posted as an introduction. If you haven't, please do. There is this Help Me corner. And the Help Me corner, when we get stuck, is a great way to put things in here that other people can also see in the responses. So week 1 discussion board. So why did I choose Python? All right, so in this particular question, we're going to ask some other questions. So the version we're going to install when we go to next week is version 3.8.xx. So the way to remember these in terms of modules and versions is these are the most minor, major, and the biggest version changes. So version 2 of Python and version 3 had a major split, and they're not really compatible in a lot of cases. So we're using version 3. The latest version, and it maybe has changed since I created this, is 8 dot something. Our text is already out of the date a minute after it was done, and it uses version 3.7 in most of its examples, and Cengage does. So are we going to have potential issues with this? Why would I make you install the latest version? Can you find an example of a change? And I give you a hint about searching a site. And part of that is to get you used to going to python.org. So python.org, this is where Python lives. So the good thing about Python is it's open source at this point. It is free. In fact, when we go here to download, and notice I'm already out of date, so now the latest version is 3.9. Great. So fairly quickly, we're going to show you how to download, and I'm going to show you that in here, you can download other versions. So I can download older versions. Why would I make you download the latest one? So think about that. All right. So if I want it for Windows, Linux, Mac, other, so notice there's Python for AIX, for AS400s. If you want to try it on your iPad, you can actually do it. There's an environment. There's actually several. If you have a Solaris machine, holy cow, they're all over the place. So you can actually bundle your own and build it if you're in Linux and you really want to be a nerd. So there are Docker containers that are running Linux. So there's a lot of different places we can put it. But I want you to start looking around this site. Hopefully you can find some things out here. There is a ton of documentation. So if I look in here, there is beginner's guides that will also be a great resource. So documents, documentaries, Python books, Python essays. There's an entire community, Python conferences, mailing lists, all kinds of things, and success stories. So we go, why did you pick this? So let's look in business. Cloud backup, anti-spam software, firmware updates. So there's a lot of different companies and organizations. If I look in government, probably a little less. Scientific, you should see a few. So these are just some of them. These are not all of the things that Python has been used to do, but these are some great examples of some of the stuff that's out there. Python news, there's even events. So this site has a ton of stuff in there. Even better, it's even got jobs. So I'm not sure how many of these are going to list salaries, but you would be amazed what it costs to get a programmer in New York City, for example. Or, so let's just grab one in Poland. Probably not going to be very helpful. Telecommuting, no agencies. These are the kinds of things they want. So there are even jobs in here if you want to see what kind of things are happening with Python. I will say I opened this with a little trepidation because last year when I did that, the very first links were all to, there were a couple of online pornography sites because some of the back end apparently for some of the web streaming services for the cam girls is hosted on Python. And there was a big ad about it right on the front page. So luckily we didn't have that issue this year. All right, I'm going to leave you alone for a little bit and let you start playing on those. The only way to learn this is you're going to have to get in there and try these experiments. Try this Python. Try out these things. The assignments are not designed to torture you. They're designed to help you. But the other piece with those is you can experiment as many times as you want. Try something different. Try it and see if you can get it to work. And as we go through, that's one of the challenges you're going to have is How do I make that work?